Let's break it down straight from the hill to your hometown. No spin, no hype, just facts we find. AI's on the case, no truth left behind. Laws are written, deals are made. Who's got your back, who's throwing shade? We cut through the noise, decode the text, keeping it real. Congress in context, Congress in context, shining the light, breaking it down so you know what's right. Policies, votes, who's working for you? We bring the facts, the power is you.
Welcome to Congress in Context.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're diving straight into the Congressional Record. We're looking at May 5th, 2025, to really pull out the key stuff happening on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, trying to make sense of the legislative actions, the big debates, the trends.
What actually happened in the House and Senate, why it matters, and, what might come next.
Yeah.
We'll touch on new bills, foreign policy talks, economic stuff, social issues, too.
And we'll look at how Republicans and Democrats are working together, or maybe not, on some of these things. It's all straight from the official record.
So, quite a bit to unpack from just one day. Where do we even start?
Well, it's always striking, isn't it, the sheer variety. You've got very specific things like helping veterans right alongside these huge global strategy discussions, and then deep disagreements on domestic policy.
It really shows the complexity of it all.
It does. Governing involves juggling a lot.
Okay, well, let's start with something that actually saw quite a bit of agreement. H.R. 1912, the Veteran Fraud Reimbursement Act of 2025, sounds pretty straightforward.
It is, fundamentally. It's about making it easier for the VA to reissue benefits that were, stolen or misused.
Making it easier how?
The old way, the VA first had to determine if they were negligent before they could pay the veteran back. This bill gets rid of that step.
Ah, okay. So before, a veteran dealing with fraud had to wait even longer while the VA investigated itself, essentially. That sounds frustrating.
Exactly. It was a bureaucratic hurdle, really. It just delayed help for veterans who were already victims. This new approach aims to get the money back to the veteran faster.
Right.
Then they can look into the fraud patterns afterward to, improve the system. But the priority is helping the vet first.
And this had strong support.
Oh, yeah. Passed the House 413-0 in the last Congress. So clearly there's a consensus that this is the right thing to do for veterans.
Good to see. Okay, let's pivot now to the international side. Foreign policy and national security seem pretty busy, too. Several bills discussed. Where should we start there? H.R. 1503.
Yes, H.R. 1503. This one tackles a really grim subject: global organ harvesting and trafficking.
Grim indeed.
And like the Veterans Bill, this also had overwhelming bipartisan support before it passed the House 413-2 previously.
So what does the bill actually do?
Essentially, it requires the State Department to report more thoroughly on this, to provide information on just how widespread this terrible practice is globally.
The record specifically mentioned concerns about China, right? Targeting groups like Uyghurs and Falun Gong.
It did. There are serious, credible reports about forced organ harvesting from these groups who are, as we know, facing horrific persecution. The bill is meant to shine a brighter light on these abuses.
And hopefully put pressure on those involved.
That's the goal: more transparency, more accountability on a global level.
Okay. Then there was H.R. 1512, the Taiwan Assurance Implementation Act. This feels very relevant given everything happening in the Indo-Pacific.
Extremely relevant. It basically builds on a 2020 law. It pushes the State Department to be more open about its own rules for interacting with Taiwan.
The idea being to reduce some of the self-imposed restrictions on how U.S. officials engage with Taiwan.
Precisely. It's about signaling stronger support, making the relationship less ambiguous, particularly, with Beijing ramping up pressure.
And again, bipartisan agreement on this.
Very strong. 404-7 in the House previously.
Yeah.
It signals a broad agreement that the U.S. needs to stand firmly with Taiwan, especially given China's recent military drills and rhetoric. It's a careful balancing act.
Understood. Next up, H.R. 36, focusing on the Republic of Georgia. A different region, different dynamics here.
That's right. This bill is also bipartisan, and it targets officials in Georgia who are seen as undermining the country's sovereignty or its path towards the West.
How does it target them?
It proposes sanctions against them. And it also mandates a review of the U.S.-Georgia relationship, including a look at Russian intelligence operations within Georgia.
The record mentioned worries about Georgia straying from its Euro-Atlantic goals. What's behind that?
Well, there's concern that recent political moves in Georgia might signal a step back from democratic reforms, maybe a drift away from alignment with Europe and the U.S. This bill sends a message. The U.S. supports Georgia's pro-Western aspirations and will push back against efforts to derail them.
Okay. Then we saw H.R. 1486, the Economic Espionage Prevention Act. This one sounds aimed at Russia.
Primarily, yes. It authorizes sanctions against anyone providing significant support to Russia's military or its industrial base.
And China comes into play here, too.
Yes. A key concern mentioned is the big jump in semiconductor exports from China to Russia since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began.
So the worry is China is helping Russia bypass sanctions, particularly for tech needed by their military.
That's the core concern. Many of these chips likely contain U.S. technology, so they should fall under export controls. This bill is about tightening enforcement, trying to cut off that supply line. And again, bipartisan support here, showing a shared worry about Russia's capabilities and China's role.
Makes sense. Sticking with human rights for a moment, H.R. 1724, the No Dollars to Uyghur Forced Labor Act. Pretty clear title.
Very clear. It prohibits using U.S. federal money for anything happening in the Xinjiang region of China that's connected to forced labor.
So ensuring taxpayer money doesn't end up supporting these abuses, given how many goods come from that region under suspect conditions.
Exactly. It reflects that growing international concern and the desire to ensure U.S. government actions aren't complicit, even indirectly.
Then there's H.R. 1316, quite a mouthful, the Maintaining American Superiority by Improving Export Control Transparency Act. What's the simple version?
Yes, simpler version. More transparency about who's applying for licenses to export sensitive stuff, especially to countries under arms embargoes.
So Congress gets a better view of where U.S. tech might be going, better oversight?
That's the idea. With technology being so critical, especially advanced tech, Congress wants more insight into the export licensing process run by the Bureau of Industry and Security to make sure it's working properly.
Got it. And finally, in this foreign policy batch, H.R. 1800, the Solidify Iran Sanctions Act of 2025. Making something permanent.
Precisely. It removes the expiration date, the sunset clause, from the Iran Sanctions Act of 1996. This makes the sanctions on Iran's energy sector permanent, essentially.
Wow.
The goal is to maintain long-term, consistent pressure on Iran over its nuclear ambitions and its support for terrorism across the region.
And the record suggested this wasn't really a partisan fight.
Correct. Broad agreement, it seems, that this sustained pressure is necessary given Iran's continued destabilizing activities.
Okay, quite a tour of global hotspots there. Let's bring it back home now and look at some of the domestic issues and debates reflected in the record from May 5th. It wasn't all big international bills.
No, definitely not. You see the everyday business, too. Like Mr. Joyce recognizing the firefighters dealing with forest fires back in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
A local issue getting national mention.
Right, and those routine but necessary things like the clerk of the House and the Democratic leader making appointments to various boards, the Public Interest Declassification Board, the Election Assistance Commission advisors.
Exactly. The machinery of government ticking along.
But we also heard some clear frustration. Mrs. Bynum from Oregon expressing concern about a lack of votes on bills to lower costs for people.
Yeah, that reflects a common sentiment, especially from the minority party, feeling their priorities aren't getting enough attention on the floor. It taps into those broader economic worries many people have.
And there were personal recognitions, too. Mr. Carter honoring someone's achievements, Mr. Stanton marking the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls.
Important moments showing the diverse issues members bring forward.
But then things got more pointed during the Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour. Some sharp criticisms aimed at the Trump administration's first 100 days.
Yes, that was quite notable. Representatives Kamlager, Dove, and Crockett raised really serious alarms about potential cuts they see coming to programs like Medicaid, SNAP, Head Start.
Big safety net programs.
Absolutely. And also concerns about rollbacks in fair housing, civil rights enforcement, environmental justice. It really highlighted those fundamental ideological divides on the role of government and domestic priorities.
And that tied into remarks from Mr. Thompson of California about Republican tax cuts, didn't it?
It did. He focused on the argument that recent tax cuts overwhelmingly benefited the wealthy, while also hitting things like the state and local tax deduction, the SALT deduction, which affects taxpayers in states like California, and, of course, raising concerns about the impact on the national debt.
That's a debate we hear constantly. The fairness of tax policy, the debt implications.
A perennial point of contention, for sure. Different philosophies about who should pay, who benefits, and what the long-term fiscal picture looks like.
Okay, let's hop over to the Senate side. What was happening there on May 5th? There was action on HJRES 61, something about emission standards for tire manufacturing.
Yes, the Senate agreed to a motion to proceed on that. HJRES 61 is likely a Congressional Review Act resolution aimed at overturning a specific EPA rule about hazardous air pollutants from rubber tire plants.
So the Senate is moving towards a vote on potentially rolling back that environmental regulation.
That's typically what agreeing to the motion to proceed means in this context, yes.
Also on the Senate agenda, a vote scheduled for Frank Bisignano's nomination to be Commissioner of Social Security. But Senator Warren voiced strong opposition.
She did. Her concerns, as reflected in the record, seemed focused on potential cuts to Social Security services or negative changes to the agency under his leadership. Protecting Social Security is, of course, a huge issue.
Absolutely. And then there was talk about stablecoins, S1582, and something called the Genius Act. That sounds very current.
Very current and very complex. Regulating stablecoins, these digital currencies pegged to traditional money, is a big debate. It touches on financial stability, consumer protection, even national security.
And the Genius Act part. What were the specific worries there?
The concerns mentioned seem to revolve around the idea of big tech companies getting into the stablecoin business. Questions about whether these giant tech firms should be issuing currency, the potential risks if they mix financial services with their other platforms, and how to prevent illicit uses.
A lot to unpack there. Financial regulation meets big tech.
Definitely an emerging and tricky area for lawmakers.
But amidst all these debates and potential conflicts, the Senate did manage to pass some things unanimously.
Yes, they passed resolutions supporting the designation of May 5th as the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, echoing the House mention, and also recognizing National Small Business Week and Community College Month.
So, finding common ground on recognizing important groups and issues.
Exactly. It shows that even in a divided environment, there are still areas of broad consensus.
And finally, the record wasn't just policy and debate. There were also tributes to individuals.
Right. People like Bill Cox, recognized for decades of service to the House. Pastor Kenny Buzzy and Eric Verosik, honored for their community work after Hurricane Milton. And Christian Birabil, noted for contributions in neuroscience and public service.
It's a good reminder, isn't it, that behind all the laws and arguments, there are people serving, achieving, helping.
Absolutely. It adds that necessary human element to what can sometimes feel like a very abstract process.
So, wrapping this all up for you, the listener, what's the takeaway from this one day, May 5th, 2025, in the Congressional Record? It's clear Congress is juggling a massive range of issues.
Yeah, from helping individual veterans with very specific problems to navigating incredibly complex global situations and dealing with those really deep disagreements on domestic policy right here at home.
We saw bipartisanship, especially on some foreign policy areas, and veteran support, which is encouraging.
But we also saw those stark partisan lines drawn very clearly, particularly on economics, social programs, and environmental regulations. That tension is always there.
And those newer issues, like how to regulate stablecoins or the ongoing questions about the future of Social Security, these show the kinds of evolving challenges lawmakers are facing right now, critical decisions ahead.
And keeping up with all this, seeing how it plays out in the official record is really, well, it's crucial if you want to understand where the country might be heading.
It helps you see where the points of friction are, but also where there might be opportunities for progress or for you to get involved.
Exactly.
So if you want to dig deeper, maybe look into some of those specific bills we mentioned, the Veterans Bill, H.R. 1912, or the foreign policy ones like H.R. 1503 on organ trafficking, or H.R. 1512 on Taiwan.
Or maybe the debate around the Genius Act and stablecoins catches your interest, or the discussions about the Social Security Administration's future.
There's a lot there. The question really is, what part of all this activity stands out most significantly to you? That's usually the best place to start your own exploration.